roll an extra d6, which you either add to the roll for advantage or subtract for disadvantage. Directly connected to that, each duality dice is different. One is a hope dice and one is a fear dice. So it helps if they're different colours, so you know which is which. When you roll a check, you have to figure out if you succeed or not. You also need to tell the GM which dice rolled higher, the hope or the fear dice. For example, if I roll a 5 and a 7 on the dice and have no modifiers, I add them up to 12, and if the hope dice rolled higher, I would say I rolled a 12 with hope. If the fear dice rolled higher, I would say I rolled a 12 with fear. Whenever the player rolls with hope, they get a hope resource which they can use in the future. Whenever they roll with fear, the GM gets a fear resource which they can use in the future. But we will get into that in a second. Having this 2-dice system means that rather than D&D, which only has 2 outcomes from a dice roll, success or failure, Daggerheart has 4 outcomes. A success with hope, a success with fear, a failure with hope, and a failure with fear. So as well as each roll giving a resource to either the player or the DM, this also has narrative consequences. A success always means a success at what the player is trying to accomplish, but a success with hope means it all went swimmingly, and a success with fear means the DM can, if they want to, add an additional complication and consequences to the roll. For example, a player is trying to pick a lock. If they succeed with hope, the door unlocks and the players move into an empty room without anyone seeing. A success with fear, the players unlock the door and maybe the players enter the room to find a guard inside. A failure with hope means the player fails at what they want to do, but it's not too bad, and a failure with fear means they fail and it's pretty bad. For example, a failure with hope means a player trying to lockpick the door fails at lockpicking it, and the players have to find another way into the room. A failure with fear means the players fail at picking the lock and are spotted by a guard who begins to chase them. This system means that every dice roll has more potential to take the story in different directions, but it also means the GM has to think more about the potential outcomes of every roll. And this is the first big difference between Daggerheart and D&D. If a GM wants just a simpler, more binary system, D&D is probably better for them. But if they want a system with more consequences to dice rolls and more narrative randomness, then Daggerheart is for them. It's also a lot harder to railroad in Daggerheart because every roll has potentially 4 outcomes instead of 2, and the story could fly off in unpredictable directions. I also think this kind of makes Daggerheart better for GMs who like to improvise on the fly more, than GMs who like to know roughly exactly how the session is going to unfold. So like I said, rolling with hope and rolling with fear either gives the player a hope resource or the GM a fear resource. Hope resources can be used by players to activate certain abilities or do certain things in game. They are pretty much focus points that monks have or sorcery points that sorcerers have in D&D, but for all classes. If you are a player and you want to be doing lots of cool stuff often, you want to be rolling with hope and collecting these hope points. They are pretty much player ammunition or like ultimate charge for the gamers out there, so you can just press Q to ult. The fear resource is the same kind of thing for the GM. The GM collects fear points every time the players roll with fear, and the GM can use this fear to do things in combat or throw random complications into the story for players. This means that the players are constantly collecting resources they can use, and the GM is also held accountable for being a jerk. If you want the bad guy to use a legendary action, you better have the fear resource to do it. You want a guard to walk around a corner randomly before the players get a chance to unlock a door, you can do it, but it will cost a fear token. There's also a transparency here that I like. When something happens in a game the players maybe don't like, they get to see the GM use a fear token. They physically move the token and say what they're going to do, so the players know the GM paid a price to do that thing. And also they know it's a limited resource that's used for other things, so the GM can't do things like this often. It also, and I think this is important, makes the game feel more like a game for the GM. It is a resource management game, and the GM is constantly collecting points and spending points. It means the GM is not in God mode like they are in D&D, where what they say just happens. The GM in Daggerheart can do whatever they want, but they are limited by how often they can do it because of this fear resource. So this is a huge difference between D&D and Daggerheart, but I should say, GMs who want to play Daggerheart more like D&D with less focus on fear points can just do that. Super quick one here. Critical successes and rolls in D&D are when you roll a 20 on the d20, but in Daggerheart, it's when you roll the same number on both d12s. This video is sponsored by Describe, a powerful resource for game masters, no matter what system you're running. Whether you're prepping for Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, Daggerheart, or any other fantasy TTRPG, Describe gives you access to thousands of richly written descriptions for characters, locations, monsters, items. I mean, you name it, they've got it. These aren't generic blurbs either, they're vivid, immersive, and system agnostic, so you can drop them right into your world with zero hassle. Plus, Describe includes maps, ambient sound, and music to enhance the vibe at your table or virtual game. It's a serious time saver and a creativity booster. Check out Describe using the link below, and huge thanks to them for supporting this video. And another quick one is Daggerheart's focus on narrative. With the duality dice and hope and fear resources, the players and the GM are constantly tugging and pulling the story in different directions. This can happen in D&D too, but to me D&D feels more like the GM is telling the story and the players get to manipulate it slightly from the inside. But Daggerheart feels more like the GM and the players are telling a story together, and each session is going to be a lot more unpredictable, for better or worse. For me as a GM, I like starting at point A and having no idea where we're all going to end up. I get to go on a journey with the players. But for others, they may want to know roughly what's going on and what's going to happen from one scene to the next. That being said, I won't really know how this all is going to play out till I get to run a long-term campaign in Daggerheart. This focus on narrative may be much less of a deal, and these two games overall could end up running very similarly narratively, especially taking into account different GM styles. So take this one in particular with a grain of salt. This one feels like a big difference on paper, but I think once we get to play with it a few times, it's going to normalize itself pretty fast. In D&D, you roll initiative at the start of combat and then take turns going in order. GMs are the most on during combat, and for me, it's the most exhausting and stressful part of D&D. And it still always feels like it takes longer than it should. Having no initiative means you don't stop the game and play a different turn-based game during combat. You just continue how you have been, asking the table who wants to go first and then asking who wants to go next. Now the issue here is that louder and more decisive players may try to go multiple times before the quieter and more indecisive players. They did have a system where players throw a token into the center once they have been, and the player can't go again until all the tokens are in the center, including the GMs, but it's all a little messy. However, it's what the game outside of combat is, both for D&D and Daggerheart, and it works there. Players don't take it in initiative turns to talk to an NPC or get drinks at the tavern
is that of an active citizen. Mark then goes on to talk about what everyday people can do to protect elections and defend democracy. Number 1, educate yourself. Elections can be complicated. The rules can vary from state to state and sometimes even from county to county. The rules also change frequently due to new laws, policies, or court rulings. My recommendation is that you spend time each month learning what's happening with voting laws in your state. Number 2, share what you've learned. Once you've figured out what's going on, share that information with your networks. It might feel awkward to bring up voter suppression or changes in election laws when we're not in the middle of a major election. But local elections happen in off years. There's one going on in Portland right now. And special elections are more common than you think. Now is the perfect time to start the conversation about voting. Number 3, run for something. I told you some of these would be big steps, and this is one of them. But that doesn't mean it's too big of a step to take. Look around, and you'll see many local elected positions that need good, qualified people. These could be town or county roles. Some of them could even be directly related to elections, like election judges or county clerks. A great place to start is the organization called Run for Something. Number 4, volunteer for a campaign. Not ready to be a candidate? Volunteer for a campaign or for your local party committee. Every campaign needs volunteers, and there's no better way to help support free and fair elections than by working for a pro-democracy candidate. Number 5, join or support pro-democracy organizations. Is partisan politics not for you? There are numerous nonprofits and grassroots orgs working every day to protect voting rights and to ensure free and fair elections. Supporting these groups with your time and resources helps these groups do their work. Number 6, become a trained poll worker. Many counties face a shortage of poll workers, especially during election season. Being a poll worker requires dedication, attention to detail, and willingness to be trained. It's a meaningful way to serve your community and to protect the integrity of the voting process. Number 7, engage your elected officials. This is something I'm always encouraging people to do. Call and write your elected officials at the federal, state, and local levels. Tell them that protecting voting rights and ensuring free and fair elections are your top priorities. Even better, show up at public meetings. Ask them directly what they're doing to combat voter suppression. See when your state rep has their constituent coffee or their pizza hour. Go and meet with them. Talk with them face to face. Go to your congressperson's website and see when their next town hall is, or message their aides, email or call their aides and ask for a meeting with them. Be informed about pending legislation and urge your electeds to support pro-democracy initiatives. This applies no matter who represents you, Democrat or Republican. Constituent pressure always matters. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. Vote in every election. Yes, everyone. That means local elections, primary elections, and special elections. Become a super voter. The more you vote, the more informed and engaged you become. You'll also be better positioned to notice and report problems, like changes to polling locations or voter equipment that could impact turnout or accessibility. I've often said I wish we had compulsory voting laws in the United States. A lot of other countries have them. It's our civic duty, and I think it's one that a lot of people do not take seriously. It's a right to be able to vote, but it's also in many ways a privilege that we should not take for granted. Okay, number 9, stay engaged. Trump is counting on you to give up. That's what I said in the last video. He assumes you'll take action for a few months or maybe even a year, and then you'll move on. Do not let that happen. To protect democracy, we must all stay engaged day in and day out. We can't just show up right before an election and tune out after. If we remain committed, democracy will win. Number 10, support independent pro-democracy media. I couldn't end without mentioning this. A healthy democracy depends on a well-informed public. Support independent pro-democracy media, subscribing to and supporting outlets like Democracy Docket and sharing their content online and in real life. Yeah, who are your favorite sources of media? Who are your favorite creators, independent journalists who are sharing pro-democracy content, who are helping equip you to resist Trump and to defend the rule of law? There's lots more I could mention besides.
This is or explore a room, and if they did, things would take forever. It would also make players think they have to do something when they really don't. I think in a perfect world, this should be the same for combat, and most of the issues with this stem from the players being a little competitive with each other during combat. They want to show off and do cool things in front of the other players. They want to roll really high damage numbers, they want to get the final blow. So if it feels like they're missing their turns, or someone else is getting more turns than them, it feels like they're being cheated. I think what Daggerheart is setting out to do is make combat less like combat and more like the collaborative storytelling that happens outside of combat. Players should be helping each other do cool stuff. They should be giving the final blow to a player who does not get to do final blows often. They should be teaming up with each other and doing combo attacks. And yes, Daggerheart allows that. And it may take players a little bit of time to get out of the D&D combat mindset, but if they can learn not to be as competitive and to work together in combat, I think Daggerheart combat could become incredibly quick and fluid. That being said, there are already alternative ways to run combat with more order without rolling initiative. My favourite being just going around a table in order as people are sat. In Daggerheart, characters have much less hit points than D&D, but damage done does not equate HP lost. In fact, Daggerheart has a damage threshold system. If a baddie does say 6 damage, the player can look at the character sheet, see a simple conversion table, and know that between 1 and 8 damage is known as minor damage, and is only worth 1 hit point. If the baddie rolled a 10, that would be major damage, and they would mark 2 HP. And if the baddie did over 16 damage, that would be severe damage, and they would take 3 HP. This system is very different from D&D, and on the surface feels way more complex, but a player's character sheet tells them exactly what each damage threshold is, so once they get their head around it, it makes the maths a lot easier, and it's nicer not to play with characters who just have crazy high HP, where the numbers kind of don't mean anything anymore. Characters also have armor slots, meaning when they get hit, they can use this limited resource to knock a damage threshold down by 1. So if they get hit by major damage and use an armor slot, it knocks it down to minor damage. This means the way players build their characters and the gear they use gives them extra chances to take less damage if they play strategically. Stress is fun for me. It's another resource like HP or armor slots. Players have so many stress slots, but it's hit points of the mind. It represents mental trauma. A player may try to do something in-game that would seriously affect them mentally or emotionally. Some characters have abilities that need to use stress points to work, and if you use up all your stress slots, you lose 1 HP. This system is kind of the equivalent of exhaustion in D&D that barely anyone uses, but it's being built up in Daggerheart to be used a lot. What happens if you don't eat or sleep for days, or you see a friend being brutally murdered in front of you? Well, you'd probably take stress points, and if you take enough of them, your body starts to take physical damage. Super quick one. But Daggerheart's species are known as ancestries, and the ones you'll find in the DH core rulebook are very different from the D&D one. And yes, I'm trying to make DH a thing. For example, you will see characters like dwarves, elves, and humans in DH just like you do in D&D, but also things like clanks, fairies, and rivets. These are similar to species found in D&D in expanded books, but in DH, these are core ancestries that speak to the kind of world DH wants to be. Obviously, you can set your games in any world you want, but without banning ancestries from the core rulebook, you'll have to account for there being robot, mushroom, and giant turtle people running around your world. First off, there are only 10 levels in Daggerheart, which is pretty much how most people play D&D anyway, but it means that hopefully in Daggerheart, level progression is more impactful. 1 level in Daggerheart potentially equals 2 levels in D&D. Now obviously, I'm sure Daggerheart will be balanced to make sure the power jumps are not too much, but also 10 levels is just easier to balance in general than the 20 levels in D&D. And we won't know till we play it, but I think in general Daggerheart's ancestries and classes will feel more balanced with each other and all be equally fun to play because they just don't have to account for as much level variety. Though obviously there's a downside to this, as maybe some players want more than 10 levels. Daggerheart is new, D&D is old, and this makes for some huge differences of how easy it's going to be to interact with this game. For example, if I want to Google how surprise works or how grappling works in D&D, I'm going to get a ton of different hits, talking about homebrew, talking about the 2014 rules, and talking about the 2024 rules. Not to mention all the older editions of D&D and 50 years of history. The name of the latest D&D rule set is confusing to say the least, 2024 5th edition, and the whole thing is just a little messy. It's been one of the biggest issues I've had with D&D 5e the past few years, Daggerheart does not have this issue. It is shiny and it's new. Things will be clear, easy to search, and because of this, I think learning Daggerheart is going to be relatively easy. On the flip side, however, I also have a ton of resources for D&D, modules, settings, and homebrew content. Daggerheart does not have any of this yet, and I think it's still going to be easier to get casuals to play D&D over Daggerheart due to brand recognition, but yeah, that's the end of the video. Subscribe.
All right, let's go. We are joined today by a few amazing people. First of all, Representative Maxwell Frost, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing okay. You know, we're in a tough situation in the House, but we're gonna keep fighting. We got a 1 a.m. hearing coming up. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But my spirits are up because we're gonna continue to fight back against this evil budget they're trying to push through.
The youngest member of Congress, making all Gen Zers proud, endless energy. I love political knife fighters, people who are out there and are willing to just, punch back a little bit. You, Jasmine Crockett. We are also joined by Dean Withers, one of the most influential, largest Gen Z creators. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. It's so good to be here. We're speaking briefly for a moment before the stream started in the waiting room. I'm very happy to be in the presence of you both, and I think today will end up being a very beneficial event for everyone. So I just appreciate both of you guys for being here.
Yeah, so I guess the reason you should care about this event, if you're watching, just to kick this off, is because we'll have 7 consecutive panels of people who are like-minded and are working to fight authoritarianism as it spreads throughout the mainstream. Every single media source you could tune into, whether, I don't know, like if you're a young dude and you're trying to watch workout videos on Instagram, you get sucked down this pipeline to RFK Jr. Or if you're looking up dating advice, you get sucked down this pipeline to Andrew Tate. So we want to provide some moral clarity at a time like this. Let's start off with Representative Frost. Can you tell me what you've been seeing on the ground, in Congress? How have people been feeling about this fight against Trump and authoritarianism? Tell me a little bit about the big ugly bill coming up.
Well, I've been on this national tour with Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, who I actually met when I was 15 years old after the Sandy Hook shooting happened, and I met him at the vigil that was going on. And over 10 years later, now we're both in Congress. We've been traveling the country, going to Republican districts and speaking with the people in districts where the congressperson refuses to do a town hall. Because what's happening is Republicans in Congress are trying to pass this thing. They're calling it the big beautiful bill, but it's really the big ugly bill. It's a bill to rip away health care from millions of Americans, to rip away nutritional and food assistance for millions of Americans, to do all these cuts. And you think, wow, we're doing these cuts to make sure that our country is more, fiscally sound and et cetera. We can help more people. But no, they want to do all these cuts so they can give billionaires and mega corporations a massive tax cut. It's the age old thing of these Republicans working to make the poor poor and the rich richer. And so we're fighting against it. But I'll tell you, as I've traveled the country and I've spoken with people face to face, I've spoken with people who voted for Trump. I've voted for people who are Democrats, Republicans, progressives, moderates, all across the spectrum. And everybody's pissed off because they're seeing the day to day impact of all these cuts. And also, the fact that all these cuts are just to make the rich even richer hurts even more to people across the political spectrum. So I'll tell you, even though times are tough with all the fighting that we're doing, I do feel a sense of optimism because the people are really rising up, and we're not going to take this. We're not going to take this shit from them. We're going to fight for the programs that help our people and help our families.
You got to hit your push to talk button.
Oh, my bad, my bad. I was cooking for a second there. But yeah, very well said. And I think that one of the silver bullet arguments when it comes to Elon Musk and the cuts and the consolidation of power is that after Trump took office, over 40 different regulatory investigations were either paused or halted or slow walked, all into Elon Musk's companies. It's just blatant corruption. I want to pass it over to Dean. You talk to Trump supporters on a daily basis. Can you tell me what you've been hearing? How are you fighting against authoritarianism?
Of course, that's a great question. So I've been speaking with Americans that support Donald Trump since before the election until now. In fact, immediately before I joined both of you here on this event, I had spent 4 hours talking to Americans that support Donald Trump. And I've noticed this I've noticed this continual trend of these people that support the president, slimming. I find it much harder for me to find individuals who are devout Trump supporters today, like I might have been able to before the election, which is something we should be optimistic about. But B, more defensive of some of the craziest things that a president can do. I mean, I seriously see America getting to a point where there is people out there that will look at Donald Trump illegally deporting Abrigo Garcia, then they will read the order that came from SCOTUS on April 10th, 2025, calling it illegal, and they will say, I don't care what SCOTUS has to say because I follow Trump's law. And in fact, I see the sentiment all the time, even as it relates to maybe his use of the Alien Enemies Act. They say it's the best thing we've had since sliced bread, even though SCOTUS has told Trump he can't use it as it relates to specific groups of immigrants because it's defined their due process. And they will just bend the knee and keel over for economic policy, which hurts them as it only is intended to help those making over $395,000 per year. And it's an issue. I think it's a problem of propaganda in mainstream media. I think it's a problem of mob mentality and just wanting to exist as a part of a group, to have other like-minded individuals as yourself, but not really to seek truth or to make America a greater place. And I think having these discussions, being able to point out those problems, have true, honest, and transparent conversations about how bad it's gotten, and how, yes, this is authoritarianism, how, yes, we are bleeding into fascism, and that is a claim made not because I'm a crazy liberal, but rather because I can read, acknowledge, and understand the 14 tenets of fascism as it's defined in the literature, is incredibly important for the future success of this country. And I love to see so many individuals having these conversations and being more outspoken and proud in their defiance of Trump, and saying that this administration is not for the people, but for them and themselves alone. And yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to due process, I love when Republicans will inverse reality and say that 9-0 Supreme Court ruling was actually in favor of Trump. But then when you press them on it, they concede they don't even care about due process anyways. Representative Frost, you went to El Salvador, right? You went to go visit CCOT. Can you tell us a little bit about what you saw on the ground there?
Well, yeah, I did go to El Salvador. I went with three other members of Congress, including Congressman Robert Garcia. The reason we went is because what we're seeing in front of us, it wasn't even just about Abrego Garcia himself, even though he's very representative of what's going on right now. But I represent many immigrants, people of different statuses, and I'll tell you that when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was sent to El Salvador, I had constituents literally coming up to me as I'm at the store, walking around the community, saying, he represents me. Like what happened to him, I'm scared it's going to happen to me. I'm scared it's going to happen to my daughter, my abuela, my grandma, my grandpa. And when we started receiving literally hundreds of letters, emails, calls, texts, DMs from constituents, people who live in my district saying, do something about this. I'm scared. And then when Donald Trump went to the White House and said in the Oval Office that he wants to send homegrowns next, U.S. citizens, to gulags in other countries for and completely not give them due process, that's really when I completely drew a line and said, no, no, it's not enough for me to just denounce this from here, but I need to go there. Number one, of course, to shine light on this issue and how it can impact anyone, but also to ask questions about where Kilmar is, try to figure out if he was moved to a different prison, at least so his family can know, and also to again completely shine light on the fact that the administration is ignoring a Supreme Court decision and completely acting outside the bounds of the law. And I think it's hilarious. We see all this hypocrisy from the Republicans in Congress and Donald Trump, even right now, as they are doing something that's never been done before. The Department of Justice is charging a sitting member of Congress, LaMonica McIver, because she went to an ICE facility to do her job and provide oversight on what's going on there. Now they're charging her with a crime. And I posted about this yesterday, and I have a ton of like MAGA cultists in my comments saying, oh, it's about the rule of law, the rule of law. If you care so much about the rule of law, tell Donald Trump to stop deporting people with zero due process. And the thing that's really frustrating to me is this: the right talks a lot about American exceptionalism, but then they want to do nothing to protect what actually makes our country exceptional and different. And one of those things is the fact that our Constitution doesn't have a thing that says, by the way, everything you just read only applies to certain people. No, no. The First Amendment, the ability to have freedom of speech applies to everyone, college students, even if you're here on a visa, right? The right to due process is something afforded to every person in the United States. These rights being afforded to everybody here are part of what makes America the country it is and makes us exceptional. And so I went to El Salvador on behalf of our rights, and I'm really glad I went. I'm going to be honest; it was a lot of the trip was sad and depressing to hear about just the treatment of folks that we're sending over there. At least we were able to get some new information on the exact jail that Kilmar was moved to. But again, it's not just about him. It's about the lawlessness we're seeing from the Trump administration and this march toward an authoritarian government. I'd say we're already in an authoritarian government that is using the federal police, using the state to send people to other countries just because they disagree with their free speech, to charge sitting members of Congress for dissenting against the Trump administration. I don't care if you're consider yourself to be a conservative or progressive or moderate or anything. You have to stand up against authoritarianism, especially because right now it might be targeting the people you disagree with, but it's a slippery slope, and at any time it can target anybody. And so we all have to care about this and speak out against it.
And that last point you made is super deep. That last point you made is the key one, because people always ask, why should I care about this? Once you create a new class of people with no due process, you can place anybody in that bucket. You can endlessly justify placing anyone in that bucket. And we've seen the Trump admin, as you said, attacking, every single check: judges, courts, universities, law firms. Multiple law firms have bent the knee. And I guess I want to pass it over to Dean. I know that you're super well read on the first Trump administration. I've seen you debate about it endlessly. What surprised you over the past 115 days? Like, for example, on day one, when he pardoned all of the January 6ers, I remember genuinely being upset. So, Dean, what's really surprised and upset you so far?
Well, the first question there, what has surprised me? I don't have a response to that because it hasn't surprised me. I think that myself, as well as every other person in America, had enough knowledge to know that something like this was bound to happen and that it will only get worse the moment Donald Trump tried to install himself for a second presidency on January 6, 2021. The moment he sent those fake slates of electors to the swing states, the moment he tried to install fake votes for himself in Congress to serve a second term against the voice and the vote of the people, and then the moment he admitted to it in proceedings in front of the Supreme Court and in Congress, but just simply said he should not face criminal immunity, was the moment I knew, as well as hopefully the moment where I wanted everybody else to know, that he has no care for the rule of law. He has no care for the Constitution. He has no care for constitutional rights. This idea of him being pro law and order and anti corruption and crime is nothing more than a mask or disguise to appeal to his base. And when he pardoned those January Sixers, I was hoping that would just make the words that are coming out of my mouth today clear to everybody, but unfortunately they didn't. It's only under a Trump presidency where undocumented migrants are persecuted to the extent of having their constitutional rights stripped from them forcefully and sent to terroristic prisons on the basis of an allegation because of an illegal entry into this country.
Push to talk. Click push to talk.
But simultaneously, if you illegally beat up a cop and drove a stun gun into their neck, such as DJ Rodriguez did on January 6th, you get called a patriot and then let out of jail by Donald Trump. It is so surprising to me that every single American hasn't woken up to the same revelations I'm sharing right now, and very sad as well. And you said that frustrated you when it occurred. It should have frustrated everyone. And the fact that it hasn't is why I'm here.
That is the surprising part, that not everyone has woken up. And that was the first thing he did on day one. Like, at least he ended the Ukraine war first, right? Oh wait, no, he didn't. At least he lowered prices first. He didn't do either of those things. Representative Frost, how are you communicating with people when you're like, okay, so this is my question. When I talk to people, like young Trump supporters, about Elon Musk gutting these institutions, they always say, I feel disenfranchised. These institutions aren't helping me in the first place. How do you describe that a lot of these institutions are necessary, even if they're bloated?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think a big part of it is bringing it home for people. We have to bring it home and talk about, like, and this is the thing I would talk to my colleagues all the time about. We actually shouldn't be seen as a party that is trying, and the people that are trying to defend the status quo, because the status quo sucks. And there's a lot more we need to do to make this country work for everyone. However, there are a lot of things that people before us have fought for generations, so that way we have some help as working people to be able to get through here. And so for me, it's less about defending institutions, but it's more about defending the programs and the people that those programs help. And so, for instance, on the Department of Education, right? It's not about defending the Department of Education. It's about defending Head Start. It's about defending Title One funding, right? It's about ensuring that we can have good rural education for students who don't live in cities, and that we have resources for students with disabilities. So I really talk about the programs more than the building itself, and that helps people realize, like, whoa, I've been fed a ton of BS in terms of what the Department of Education does. It's the same thing when I talk about what's going on with the VA. I mean, when we keep the conversation to a thing in DC, it is a lot easier for somebody like Donald Trump to just lie to his supporters about what's going on. But when a veteran goes into their local VA and their favorite front desk person has recently been fired for absolutely no reason, and it's taking longer and longer and longer for them to get the care that they deserve, it's hard for someone like Donald Trump in an ivory tower in DC to be able to spin that. And by spin that, I mean to be able to essentially lie about that and make it fit his narrative. And that's really what I found in my travels is more and more. And I think part of the reason why Dean has mentioned that it's harder and harder to find kind of these people who are like ride or die Trump is because I think people are starting to feel things at home, and it is hard to lie to someone about something they're seeing in front of their very own eyes. And so for me, it's bringing it home for people. We gotta stop talking about this in the abstract. There's nothing abstract about money being taken away from the mouths of children because single mothers won't be able to get nutritional assistance anymore. We're talking about like $7 a day to help like a family feed people because we can all agree that the system right now as it is not set up for us. And Donald Trump lied when he said he was going to make it the golden age for America. He's making it the golden age for the billionaires and the dark ages for everybody else.
Dude, that's what I've been saying lately as well, that Elon's making the government more efficient for himself and his own companies,
Exactly.
especially the one where all of these regulatory investigations are just paused or halted after Trump fired the inspectors general. Clear public intimidation. Dean, I actually want to know how you'd respond to the same question. Say you're debating a Trump supporter And like, not even the illegality of it. Of course, Elon Musk subverted the power of the purse. Of course, Elon Musk subverted the Constitution. They don't care about that. How do you explain that some of these programs are actually necessary? What's your argument?
Well, this is a way that I like to address it to the average Trump supporter that comes on my live. The Trump administration, with the Department of Government Efficiency, will still be spending more of your hard earned money than Kamala Harris's administration without the Department of Government Efficiency. So these projections are coming from the Congressional Budget Office. All of Donald Trump's proposed policies estimated to cost somewhere in between 10 and 15 trillion dollars. Keeping in mind, around 6 to 8 trillion of that 10 to 15 trillion is just for tax cuts, which disproportionately benefit the most wealthy of those among us, right? Meanwhile, we look over at what Kamala Harris had proposed for her presidency. We were looking at maybe 6 to 8 trillion dollars of overall new debt-related spending, with the majority of that being spent on tax cuts for you and 100 million American workers just like you. So when the Trump administration will boast about how efficiently they're cutting down these programs, even though they have no clue what those programs are or how they benefit Americans, at the end of the day, he is going to turn around and spend trillions more than he could ever cut. Elon said the most they could cut it is around $1 trillion on systems that benefit the millionaires and the billionaires. So I don't even find it efficacious to try to sit there and describe to some of these rather dense people I'll speak with about what the particular systems are that are being cut. I leave that to those that are significantly more knowledgeable than I am, and just simply point out the fact that at the end of the day, our government's going to be spending more money than it would have if he wasn't elected. And I mean, that same trend was true in his first term too. According to the CRBF, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, they spent $8.6 trillion. You look at Biden and Harris, they were down at $4.6 trillion. This myth of being fiscally conservative, wanting to cut down on the wasteful expenditure of our government, vanished with the start of Donald Trump's first administration. The fact of the matter is, today, the party that's not only focused on ensuring that there is good and efficacious social safety nets to provide for those that are the most needy around us, not only ensuring that the purchasing power is in the hands of the workers, in the hands of the average American, but also ensuring that we are keeping our government expenses lower than that of the other party, is the Democrats, is the left, is the liberals, 110%. It is Trump who's bloating our federal expenditure. He's just hiding that and masking that under this guise of the DOG.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for hosting this. I know there are a few panels after this, so make sure you stick around and enjoy it. I really enjoyed chatting with Dean and Representative Frost. I think that this is the way forward. I've been to a few panels and been to a few DC events where it's just like having a bunch of people in the same place working towards the same goal really energizes you and makes you feel like, I don't know, we're going to win again and we're going to come back stronger. Whenever there's a time of crisis is when you kind of reevaluate. Like during COVID, we did a little bit of a reset to see where we can go forward. That's what the party's doing right now. And I think the best communicators are rising to the top. And I'm glad that we all get to be a part of that. So that's all I have to say. Find me youtube.com/Adam Mockler.
You know that Donald Trump realizes he's in a world of trouble as it relates to his budget bill passing when this is the spin he's debuting.
Waste, fraud, and abuse.
Can you guarantee that your voters who supported the election, particularly working class voters, will not lose health insurance under this bill?
Oh, they won't lose health insurance. Not only that, remember, I'm cutting drug prices by 85%. And right now, I'm saving it. I'm saving the whole thing because I did something that nobody was willing to do. Other countries pay a tiny fraction what we do, and I instituted favored nations. We're now going to pay the lowest in the world. We're going to be the equivalent of the lowest country in the world.
That's Donald Trump claiming that his supporters, quote, won't lose health insurance, which should come as a surprise to reality, which is that a staggering 13.7 million Americans stand to lose their health coverage if Donald Trump's budget actually gets passed. According to the bipartisan Joint Economic Committee, cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act would result in roughly 13.7 million people losing their health insurance by 2034. So I get that it's convenient for Trump to pretend that no one will lose their health coverage, but millions upon millions of Americans will. And he knows that, but this isn't about the truth, and it certainly isn't about protecting his voters. It is about selling them a bill of goods that ultimately protects the wealthiest Americans and getting that bill of goods passed by any means necessary. If that includes straight up gaslighting the very people who he's about to fuck over, then so be it. In fact, it would be nothing new for Donald Trump. He came into office in 2017 amid promises that he would deliver a middle-class tax cut that never materialized, an infrastructure law that never materialized, a jobs boom that never materialized, a healthcare plan that was cheaper and more comprehensive that never materialized. But you know what did materialize? A tax cut for millionaires and billionaires and corporations. Trump's entire MO is promising the world to his supporters and then delivering only for his wealthy donors. He did it then, and he's doing the exact same thing now. He then goes on to say that he's, quote, cutting drug prices by 85%. Right. Why not just say you're cutting by 99% while you're at it? I'm sorry, but anybody who thinks that drug prices are going to fall by 85% because Donald Trump wrote an executive order decreeing it like he's some royal overlord has no idea how this actually works. You know how you lower drug prices? You allow one entity, the government, to negotiate them down. It's called single payer, where the single payer in this instance is the government. It's a system that we don't have and that Republicans largely refuse to adopt. The reason that drug prices are cheaper in other countries is because they allow their governments to negotiate on behalf of all of their citizens. In America, though, it's every man for himself. And so no wonder we have high drug prices. We've got no bargaining power. And Big Pharma spends a shitload of money entrenching that very system. So again, Trump can pretend that he's doing something, but he knows that he's not. In fact, pharmaceutical stocks are mostly up this week. And admittedly, I'm no genius when it comes to the stock market, but I would think that if the US suddenly defeated Big Pharma and mandated 85% cuts to drug prices, their stock prices would probably not go up, they would go down. But hey, other than that, airtight logic. And look, I hope that drug prices do come down. That's why I supported the provision in the Inflation Reduction Act allowing the government to negotiate down 10 drug prices, and that 10 should turn into 10,000. And this Republican-led Congress could do that if they wanted to. But it doesn't want to. It would rather let Donald Trump continue pretending, cosplaying that he can actually do it without ever having to deliver those results. They are perfectly content to let their constituents be manipulated, lied to by Trump, while they themselves work for their real master, the millionaires and billionaires who fund their campaigns and desperately want their tax cuts. But then Donald Trump goes on.
You campaigned on lowering the price of groceries. How will you justify cutting food assistance in this bill?
Let me just tell you, the cut is going to give everybody much more food because prices are coming way down. Groceries are down. Eggs. You told me about eggs. You asked me a question about eggs my first week. You said eggs. I said, I just got here. Tell me about eggs. And it was going through the roof. You know that eggs now are way down. Everybody's buying eggs. Groceries down. Energy's down. Gasoline is now they're buying gasoline now for $1.99.
Oh, cutting $230 billion from SNAP benefits is going to give more people food. Here I was thinking that when you cut funding, it means less money to fund those programs. But apparently, I was mistaken. You know what? Why don't we also cut military funding and get a stronger military? Why don't we cut healthcare funding and get more healthcare? Why don't we cut congressional salaries and they can make more money? I'll tell you what, I, for one, am very hopeful about this new math and all of the opportunities that it presents. In reality, for those living on Earth 1, cutting $230 billion from SNAP benefits does not offer anyone more food. And thanks to Donald Trump's trade war, food prices are not slated to decrease, but in fact, the polar opposite. According to the Economic Research Service, in 2025, overall food prices are anticipated to rise slightly faster than the historical average rate of growth. In 2025, prices for all food are predicted to increase 3.5%, with a prediction interval of 1.9 to 5.1%. Food at home prices are predicted to increase 3.2%. Food away from home prices are predicted to increase 3.8%. In other words, food prices are not only going to rise, but rise faster than average. If you're not yet realizing it, when Trump says anything, you can basically just expect the polar opposite to be true. But still, he'll say it because the people around him are collectively too chicken shit to push back. In fact, far from offering any pushback, they genuflect at the altar of Donald Trump.
And I think this was a tremendous session. You may want to say something.
Yeah, it was a great meeting. The party is unified. The House Republican Conference is excited. Multiple standing ovations. They love this president. The people back home love what he's doing. It's historic, and everybody understands the scope and the meaning of this. If we do not accomplish this mission, every one of you, all the American people are going to have the highest tax increase that you've ever had. And among the debt ceiling cliff that's approaching and all the other problems, this is the bill to do it. I think we're going to get it done, Mr. President.
Multiple standing ovations? Well then. As long as Trump's sycophants and mouthpieces stood up and clapped for him, then I think our work here is done. And notice how Mike Johnson says that if you don't vote for this bill, you'll have the highest tax increase you ever had. He's actually talking to the wealthiest Americans, and he's right. They would suffer a massive tax increase. According to Penn Wharton's analysis, combined, those policies could fall disproportionately on the poorest, including those near or below the poverty line, the economists found. People making between about $51,000 and $17,000 could lose about $700 on average in after-tax income beginning in 2026, according to the analysis, when factoring both wages and federal aid. The reduction would worsen over the next 8 years. People reporting less than $17,000 in income would see a reduction closer to $1,000 on average, also increasing over time. By contrast, the top 0.1%, including those with incomes over $4.3 million, would gain on average more than $389,000 in after-tax income in 2026, the data show. So the poor would lose another $700 to $1,000 per year, and the rich would gain another $389,000 per year. But sure, working class champions, got it. The reality is that Donald Trump will say whatever he needs to say to get what he wants, and what he wants is a tax cut for people like him. If he or his party cared about the working class, they would deliver for the working class, but they don't. Costs of everything are going up. Healthcare costs are going up. Food costs are going up. Costs of imports that line the shelves are going up. And all the while, Donald Trump sees this as an opportunity to reward people in his tax bracket. Don't listen to what he says. Watch what he does. And what he's doing is handing a gift to the wealthiest Americans while yet again throwing the working class under the bus. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching.
Hello, my friends, and welcome. My name is Dennis, and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's go. And also, I want to skip speaking about Donald Trump today, at least in this video, because I want to have day off from his madness. That's why right away we're gonna speak about crazy Russian motorcycle attacks or no. Well, guys, believe me or not, but it is a Ukrainian army. Yeah, Ukraine took the idea to storm enemy positions using kind of the quick and nimble transport as dirt bikes. Our guys are on a training using those dirt bikes and how to attack with those mobile groups. Probably it will take them several more weeks to master the skills of those attacks. For now, Ukraine implemented that experiment in Skala Brigade. Skala means rock. Well, from this video and comments about it, and they took some of the interviews with our guys, well, our soldiers understand the risks of those attacks, but nevertheless, they want to try it out. And the motorcycles, well, they're quite capable for those particular needs, but my friends, there is no any armor. And watching those videos with the Russian motorcyclists, well, I cannot imagine watching the same stuff with the Ukrainian soldiers. It may in a way demotivate Ukrainian army or Ukrainian people in general, because they attack in this death zone of 10 kilometers, where Russian and Ukrainian FPV drones are flying. Well, you may say, Dennis, you were making fun of the Russian stupid motorcycle attacks, and now Ukrainian army does the same stuff. Well, first of all, I told about the profit of those attacks and how Russia uses those to gain the ground, sending mid-wave after mid-wave on those motorcycles. And yes, I was making fun, but just occasionally. For example, then Russians attacked Ukrainian positions with the mounted Soviet and Russian flags on their motorcycles, so it looks absolutely crazy. It's like they want to attract more attention of Ukrainian drone operators. Or I was making the fun about the Russian guy who wanted to jump over the anti-tank trench on his dirt China motorcycle. Yeah, just dirt bike, it's better to say, and Ukrainian drone operators stayed without any sort of the job because the guy kaputted himself. But the tactics itself with the fast maneuverable attacks, it actually works, and Ukraine wants to try it out. However, there is one thing: you'll have way more losses using motorcycles on the front lines. You need to have lots of the infantry forces to put them on motorcycles and use them as mid-waves, as Russia does, for successful gaining of the ground. And for this reason, I don't think that attacking on motorcycles would be spread widely in Ukrainian army. No. My prediction that it will be just limited for Skala regiment. Otherwise, guys, yeah, there will be more losses. Yeah, there is the price you have to pay. If you want to move fast, you also need to go without any armor across the minefields and under the drone strikes. And you know, Ukraine is after all more in defense, so motorcycles are not needed actually for defending. At least for now, they will not be in use massively. So for Russian side, yeah, I think that they use these tactics and they show that they might take the ground. Occasionally, kind of the small portions, but they do it. Compared to the previous years, this year Russia uses motorcycles a lot. Well, maybe it happens because they're running out of their usual transport, BMPs, BTRs. We also see how they use civilian vehicles. And about the technical or tactical features, Ukraine takes something from the Russian side and Russians take something from Ukrainian side. It is a usual thing for every war. For example, Ukrainian side started to use FPV drones with artillery shells or RPG shells at first. Also, the drone drops were coming from Ukraine as well. Russia took their idea, they implement their solutions. For example, they use fiber optic cables to operate those drones without being intercepted by the drone jammers. And now Ukraine has to implement the same technology. It's the usual thing, but again, on my opinion, motorcycle attacks will not work for Ukraine. And yeah, Russians are using the same China-made motorcycles. China supplies those to Ukrainian, to the Russian side, the same they do with the drones. China tried to restrict the cooperation with some of the companies which were buying some of the stuff from China for Ukrainian drone army, but after all, somehow Ukraine gets those drone parts, as well as Ukraine will get those motorcycles. And yeah, guys, unfortunately I have to tell also about the bad news coming. After all, I tell the truth on my channel and the things as they are. On this image, by the way, filmed by the Russian drone and presented by the Russian side, you may see many of the Ukrainian soldiers gathered in a large group located open air in Shostka base of Sumy region, Ukraine. Somehow, local Ukrainian commanders decided to put them all together in bright daylight conditions, but Russia has many of those surveillance spy drones, and their task is to fly around Ukrainian territory and spot military activity of Ukrainian army and also coordinate the strikes of the Russian Iskander ballistic missiles. And that is exactly what happened according to this video. Well, we do not have the zoomed in image, and the shell, the Iskander missile, hit nearby, not exactly the place where the soldiers were staying, but Iskander also equipped with the shrapnel, which hits everything around. Those small particles were sent elsewhere in this perimeter. The information about the strike has just been published, and I am waiting for more details. There's nothing about the losses so far, but the Russian strike was definitely big. Iskander missile is a very powerful missile. After after all, and I guess there will be losses. Why Ukrainian commanders are still gathering their military outside in large groups and even inside? Well, that's the question to Ukrainian generals, and some of them are quite incompetent still. They are Soviet-grown generals, let's say. In my tomorrow's video, I'm gonna update you with more information about the case, but our volunteers, our military who are public out there on Telegram, in the Ukrainian media as well, they all sad and disappointed, first of all, with the Ukrainian generals responsible for that particular facility. And by the way, it happened not just here, but Russia in the same way hit Ukrainian Patriot launchers, the other military gathering groups, so it happened before already. It shows that the same mistake is happening again and again. In this case, it is called crime. It could be even a betrayal, because why you gathered those soldiers in the same place? I also speak about it because my friend and colleague Dmitro, who was a volunteer who was working with the Ukrainian military on some very sophisticated drones, he lost his life also in the same way. It was a Russian missile strike on his position, far away actually from the front lines. Alright guys, and now I have just received the information about the Russian strike on the Ukrainian military base. Still, I'm in lack of the information about the losses, but at the same time we have the evidence, the visual one, that the strike wasn't really precise. The barrack is just partially damaged, but the main strike happened over here where the trees are no more. I just hope that there were no losses, but in general we'll find out this information, because usually from Ukrainian channels, including Telegram channels, it goes public after all. The particular military base of Ukraine is located roughly 50 kilometers away from the border with Russia, so quite far away from the front lines, but Russian Iskanders, they have the range of 550 kilometers, plus the Russian surveillance drones may fly for 100 kilometers easy. Unfortunately, this time Russians managed to strike Ukrainian base. And guys, here I want to thank my Patreon supporters and also members of the channel. Guys, thank you so much for keeping me running. Just because of you, and yeah, some sponsors of my channel, I can continue filming videos almost every day. So many thanks for your kind support. And the link for my Patreon, well, it's always in the video description just below. If you don't have the opportunity or you're not willing to support me in a financial way, you may press your huge like and subscribe for the channel. That is how you also help me a lot. Right guys, somehow we have good news coming from the United States of America, from Rubia to be in particular. And yeah, this flag is not the Russian one, it's Slovenian or Slovakian, just an internet image to show you Patriot system. Well, anyways, the United States of America is looking for cooperation between them and European partners to find some of the air defense systems for Ukraine. Awesome, great news. Well, before Zelensky asked even to purchase Patriot systems from the United States, but you know the answer from the guy whom I don't want to mention today. And before, with previous administration, Ukraine was left mainly with promises, but still Ukraine obtains munition for Patriot systems, and it is great. And yeah, yesterday I've told you about the good news from Italy that Ukraine might get SAM-T air defense, which is, I would say, almost the same class as Patriot. Well, Rubio also mentioned today that the United States of America will continue to deliver to Ukraine the previously agreed military packages. However, there is no certainty that the United States of America would vote for new military packages. For now, that question is not even out there in Congress, in Senate, or the White House. And that is not very good picture, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe in general. And yeah, Marco Rubio also mentioned that there will be no new sanctions implemented on Russia. It is understandable already for everyone. Right guys, now let's go to the frontlines updates and the situation in Rivnopil. For the last 24 hours, Russia moved from Novopil, and in a way they created this pocket for Ukraine. It is kind of the big one actually. There are many fields but no any settlements. Some of the field roads are there, and the presence of the Ukrainian army in this region has been confirmed. However, the number of Ukrainian forces here is limited, and I expect that Russia will just take those territories very soon. So yeah, we have the confirmation from the Mykov Center 3 analytic, whom I always mention in my videos. So Russians went to Novodarivka very fast, later on to Novopil, Zelenopole, and they created this very tiny bottleneck. And they also have this vector of attack. And guys, I'm still collecting the information about Ukrainian army presence in those fields. Probably in my next update I'm gonna tell you more about this case. But yeah, this Russian attack doesn't look good for Ukraine in this region at all. Well, what we have is just this drone image presented by Ukrainian army. So Ukrainian army hit the Russian one in that position. That's all we have. And it was published yesterday. So in a way, Russians tried to assault from Novosilka as well. And also you see that here Ukraine lost the tank, and actually we have the confirmation about it. Well, Russia also has losses. It was definitely something really big. I cannot show you this image fully here on YouTube. Yeah, what can I say, that the fight is ongoing, the front lines are boiling, but sometimes Russia manages to pocket Ukrainian forces, causing Ukrainians to retreat and leaving positions very fast. Why is it happening like that? Well, because Russians, they still have advantage over Ukrainian army, unfortunately. And the only way how Russia might agree on peace deal with Ukraine is the inability for the Russian army to advance on front lines at all. And actually, I think that it could happen. Well, not this year, but in the coming years. Yeah, if Ukraine keeps enough military support, if Russian economy continue to degrade, if Russian people wouldn't like to join the Russian army, that might bring the military collapse for Russia. But at the same time, idea of Putin is to bring the military collapse for Ukraine, for our allies to freeze the military support, and Russia also wants to destabilize Ukrainian society. That's their main plan, and for now Putin is sure that he is able to reach his goal, but I don't think so. Well, the Deep State Military Map source also publishes the same information, that Russians were successful, and now probably Ukrainian army is in a difficult, very difficult situation out there, not far away from Rivnopil. And before here it was the successful Ukrainian counterattack, but now Russia took the advantage. The other direction where Russian army gained the ground is between Pokrovsk and Toretsk. Over here they continue to expand their bridgehead, so it was yesterday and it is today. They almost took Yelizavetovka and continue to move to the east. This Russian advancement is the great threat for Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, and for Toretsk actually. Ukraine was defending those settlements. For Pokrovsk it was really a successful defense for Ukraine. In Toretsk, well, Russia still cannot get the town fully, but here probably Russians found the weak spot and they went all in over here, expanding it across the highway, which is unusable for any sort of the supplies, both for Russia and Ukraine, because Ukraine also hit Russians really hard with FPV drones and artillery. Well, according to some of the sources, I still need to confirm those, Ukraine has expanded the territorial gains in the Kursk region. But for now, guys, honestly, I don't have the robust evidence of that information. Yesterday, there was the fight at the border between Ukraine and Kursk. Yeah, not far from Veselo village, there were reports, but about the territorial gains, I guess it is early to say. There was also the attempt of the Russian army to attack Ukrainian positions not far away from Pokrovsk, but this attack totally failed for Russians. Yeah, this time they found even some of the BMPs and they put huge electronic warfare on the top, but it didn't help. All of the Russian BMPs were just kaboomed, and I'm gonna publish it on Rumble. A Russian puppet Simeon, who lost the presidential elections in Romania, called the court of the country to cancel the elections result. It's the usual thing for those populist idiots. Elections were rigged. What else can they say? But it seems like we have the other idiot. His name is Pavel Durov, and guys, I was wrong about the guy. He retweeted Simeon post saying that I'm ready to come and testify if it helps Romanian democracy. The Romanian democracy is now alive because this guy is not a winner. But Pavel Durov clearly defends Simeon here. And Pavel also accuses the French side because France wanted to restrict the Simeon Russian propaganda on Telegram as well. And Durov here, well, he actually reminds me Elon Musk with his ideas and support of the potentially future dictators. So Pavel Durov, I hope you'll get back to the French prison, because somehow he was released and he went back to UAE. So yeah, I understand, and I admit that I was wrong about Pavel Durov. I'm sure that he's not supporting democracy in any sort of the perspective, and he's just this rich billionaire who wants to spread his own influence. as well as the influence of the other billionaires. Crypto corporate world is what they want to build from our society. I call it tech slavery, but it's the topic of another video. And by the way, my friends, I'm still gonna use Telegram. First of all, I have my own channel there, it's kind of big, and I also check out the Russian Telegram channels and I get the information which is useful for us to review. And by the way, Ukrainian Telegram channels also help a lot in collecting, for example, funds for the military. Our allies from European Union and United Kingdom apply more sanctions on Russia, but will it help? Actually, I don't think so. Yeah, it may harm in a way the Russian economy, but as it was announced before, United States is not participating in the sanctions, which means that the meeting that took place in Ukraine 10 days ago, then the leaders of the powerful European countries gathered and told that they agreed the sanctions package together with the United States. Well, that talk doesn't mean anything now. More sanctions applied by UK and European Union, well, they don't matter that much compared to the military support of Ukraine. Ukraine should obtain more from Europe too. Alright guys, and for now, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot, and as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time. And yeah, I'll have the question of what is that out there? It is the copy of Rolls-Royce turbofan engine. Just look at this. Wow, such a nice model. Will stay there for some time.
Welcome back, Defenders. Brazil. Would Donald Trump ever talk about the unlimited economic potential of Spain? Or the unlimited economic potential of trade with Brazil? Canada has a larger economy than Russia, and Donald Trump says that Canada is basically worthless. It's an appendage of the United States that should be annexed. Canada is a rounding error, but for some reason Russia has unlimited trade potential with the United States. And this is about corruption. This is about Trump wanting a bribe either from the Russians or the Europeans. He doesn't care, as long as he gets paid. Donald Trump's first overseas visit in his first term was to Saudi Arabia, and Donald Trump's first overseas visit in his second term was to Saudi Arabia, because he's looking for a bribe for both him and his family. Trump lifts Syria sanctions, agrees to sell Saudi Arabia $142 billion in arms. You can have a mixed opinion on the new leader of Syria. He's a former al-Qaeda fighter, but he's better than Bashar al-Assad. And you can have mixed opinions on Saudi Arabia and the Crown Prince MBS, but he's also a murderer. But Donald Trump loves these guys. He loves going to palaces and meeting with princes and observing all of the gold and marble and ceremonies, and the fact that in this man's country you can't criticize him. Anybody in Saudi Arabia who criticizes the Crown Prince is murdered. And Donald Trump loves that. He loves dictators and he just wants a bribe. So I'm going to spell it out for you. Deals, according to the White House, deals that Trump signed with Qatar will generate at least $1.2 trillion for the United States. This is a made-up number. It is monetarily impossible for Qatar to do $1.2 trillion of business with the United States when Qatar's entire GDP is only $213 billion. The entire economic output of this tiny country, it's a wealthy oil kingdom, but they're very small relative to the size of America's economy. Their GDP is only $213 billion, and the White House is claiming America is going to get $1.2 trillion from them. No, that is impossible. Qatar cannot spend 5 years of their entire economic output in trade deals with the United States. So the Saudis know this. The Emiratis know this. The Qatarians know this. They're just making up numbers. And Donald Trump loves it. He gets to brag on social media and tell his followers that he's making trillions of dollars of deals with the Gulf states when This isn't going to happen. None of this is real. How many legally binding trade agreements has Donald Trump signed in the first 120 days of administration? And it's zero. Because Congress has not voted on anything. It's all made up. If Qatar wanted to say they were doing $10 trillion worth of deals with Donald Trump, Trump would have said, it's true. We're doing $10 trillion worth of deals with Qatar. It's all fake, guys. So what is Donald Trump looking for? Why does he keep talking about trade? And he wants a bribe for him and his family. Some kind of deal where there will be corruption and slush funds will be created, money is moved around, and Donald Trump and his children directly benefits. Trump doesn't care who bribes him first, the Russians or the Europeans. He just wants some grand deal worth trillions of dollars that he can brag about to his followers on social media. And the funny thing is Russia doesn't want to do it. Russia's economy is $2 trillion. So announcing an aluminum deal or Arctic trading routes or a gas deal worth $1 trillion, like Trump isn't going to waste his time on anything unless it's got a big number with a T, $1 trillion at least. And the Russians aren't doing what he wants, but Trump isn't willing to close the door entirely. Here's the good news. I do think Donald Trump is getting frustrated. I do think Donald Trump is going to increase pressure on the Russians, but he doesn't want to publicly say it. He's going to have other people do it for him. He is never going to say anything critical of Putin or the Russians because he wants to keep the door open in the future for getting a nice bribe from either Putin himself or whoever replaces Putin in the future. So this is Trump's problem. Over 60% of Americans believe Putin is stalling the peace talks and they're wasting the United States' time. Public support for Ukraine is popular here in the United States. Most Americans don't like Russia, and they think what the Russians are doing in Europe is terrible. Donald Trump likes being popular. Donald Trump can commit more corruption if he has popular support. So Trump is just allowing things to happen, even though this isn't what he wants to do. Strong EU sanctions are coming soon. The United States is expected to sanction Russian banks, according to President Zelensky. So somebody in Trump's government is telling Zelensky this. EU is coordinating next Russia sanctions with the United States, according to the German government. So somebody in Trump's government is talking to the German government saying, yes, increased sanctions are coming. EU likely to propose lowering the G7 price cap on Russian oil to $50 per barrel. It's currently set at 60, and because oil prices have fallen anyways, the G7 wants to lower this to 50. But this is meaningless unless the United States participates in the price cap. So somebody in Trump's government is talking to G7 leaders saying, yes, we're going to go along with this. And I've told you guys, MAGA is almost evenly divided, whether or not they want to support Ukraine and defeat Russia, or they want to call themselves isolationists and just allow Russia to do whatever they want. But the pro-Russia faction of MAGA has been very quiet the last month. Elon Musk has basically all but disappeared. Elon Musk says he'll spend a lot less time and money on US politics. Elon Musk plans to cut back on political spending. Elon Musk is no longer talking about Russia. He is no longer publicly supporting Russia or retweeting Russian fascists. We're also getting statements within Trump's government. I trust the US Treasury Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. I think it's him and his team who are talking to foreign leaders about increasing sanctions on Russia, and this is going to be unveiled, but Trump's not going to be the one to say it or do it. He'll probably just have Rubio or Bessent make the public announcements. And then there's retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. He has not been fired. He is still around. Here's what he's saying. In Istanbul, Secretary Rubio made it clear that we have presented a strong peace plan. Coming out of the London meeting, we came up with a comprehensive 22-point plan that is a framework for peace. The first point is a comprehensive ceasefire that stops the killing now. That is what President Trump wants. And then there's all these minor things. The F-16 pilots that are going to be trained here in Arizona, the sale of equipment, the approval of the transfer of the Patriot system from Israel to Ukraine. The United States resumes Black Sea high-altitude drone surveillance after an 11-month absence. So this is the Global Hawk surveillance drone that it's launched from Sicily. But the United States is doing surveillance of the Russians and providing this intelligence to Ukraine. They wouldn't be doing this if Donald Trump didn't want it to happen, or if Donald Trump stopped it. The United States allows Australia to send Abrams tanks to Ukraine despite private objections. Last year, Australia announced they were going to send 49 decommissioned Abrams tanks to Ukraine. And the United States said, please don't do that. We're engaged in peace talks with Russia. Australia told the United States to get bent, and they were going to send the tanks anyways. And Trump's government folded and said, fine, you can send the tanks. Trump's not stopping the transfer of military equipment to Ukraine if it, has a U.S. export license. This is all good news. You just have to read between the lines. And then there are very powerful and influential MAGA influencers that have been very aggressive towards Russia the last 2 months. Piers Morgan is a favorite of mine, but here's Ben Shapiro, once again on his daily broadcast, talking about the Russians and how they're not our friends, and they're not cooperating, they don't want peace, and they're going to continue these wars. So I'll play a little bit of this Ben Shapiro clip.
So again, it's going to be very unclear as to what happens from here, but it should be made clear at this point that Vladimir Putin does not actually want anything like a negotiated peace that sets the lines where they are. He does not want that. Vladimir Putin believes the United States will eventually walk away. And hell, if you were Vladimir Putin, you'd probably believe that too. The United States has, over the course of the last 20 years, walked away from the Kurds, the Afghans, the people of Hong Kong, and now maybe the people of Ukraine. So why wouldn't they? I mean, really, that is the game that Vladimir Putin is playing. He's playing the long game here.
Does Donald Trump and his government want to abandon Ukraine and see the city of Zaporizhia destroyed, the city of Kharkiv destroyed, the city of Odessa destroyed slowly over the next several years? These headlines are never going to go away. Reporters are never going to stop asking Trump questions. Trump can't make a deal with the Russians to make them stop, so he has no choice. Eventually, Trump is going to have to allow his subordinates to get aggressive and force the Russians to stop this war somehow. He can't walk away. What are the Russians saying about all of this? Here's the latest clip from Russia Media Monitor. Russian pundits say Trump's peace plan won't lead to peace. Shocker. Let me read this for you. If Russia doesn't agree to compromise, to make significant concessions, Trump, is ready to impose serious sanctions against the buyers of Russian oil. He is ready to do it. Michael, the fact that Russia is talking to the other side, that is on the verge of military defeat. So this is the Russians claiming that Ukraine is on the verge of military defeat. Isn't this a concession? Trump himself said this is a concession, but it's insufficient. Yes, he said that he is simply amazed and was glad when he found out, and these are his words, that it turns out Russia no longer wants all of Ukraine. Where did he get this idea? What makes him think so? Trump said this in an interview like a week ago that Russia has given concessions. They're not trying to take the entire country, and this is the Russians refuting that, saying, where did Trump get this crazy idea? But for him, this is the main concession. He really believes that Russia will agree to freeze it on a permanent basis like the Korean option. He is seriously thinking he has already achieved the most important thing, that Russia is ready to stop along the current front line. Does he, Trump, want a confrontation with Russia? Of course, he doesn't want a confrontation with Russia. He wants to come to the Middle East and be gifted planes, those flying palaces. He wants to tell American voters who support him about trillions of dollars. This is what he will be doing. He wants a prize. He has the money, but he wants a prize. He wants a crown. When Putin set a meeting in Istanbul, he made an appointment, so to speak, but we don't know how it may be turned against him. Only our soldiers can drag everything over to our side. We're following our own path. We are continuing the special military operation. The goals of our special military operation have to be achieved along with our security. This is the Russians on Kremlin state TV saying, whoever said we were going to stop? If Putin wants all of Ukraine, we will continue going until we take all of Ukraine. We'll stick with the story, guys. This is getting interesting. I do think we have another month or so of this nonsense, but by late June or July, I do think the Trump administration is going to get serious about bone-crushing sanctions being placed on the Russian economy. I also want to mention this story. It's not really getting a lot of attention. Russia to launch ICBM Sunday as show of intimidation. This is what Ukrainian intelligence reported, and the State Department also put out an advisory warning in Kyiv. So the U.S. also had this intelligence that Russia was going to test launch an ICBM potentially on a Ukrainian city. They did this with the Orshnik last year. The ICBM didn't have a warhead. There was no nuclear device, but the fragments of the dummy re-entry vehicle did land on the city of Dnipro. So there was speculation that Putin was going to launch an ICBM test on Kyiv and just let, the fragments land where they land. But where's the missile? No sign of Russia's Yars ICBM launch. Russia tried to launch a nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile, and nothing happened. No roar, no flash, just silence over Severodolsk. And we didn't get reports that something blew up in the hole like last time. It's possible Putin delayed the launch because of all this peace talk stuff happening this week. Or Russia tried to launch another ICBM and it failed to go off. This happened in September of last year. Russia tried to launch an RS-28 Sarmat ICBM. This was a test, and it blew up in the hole. These are potentially some of my favorite satellite images from this entire war. I used to be an ICBM operator for the U.S. Air Force on the Minuteman III. And look at these pictures. So here's the building. It's the same building, and that is an ICBM blowing up in the hole. Russia's got problems. Russia's got serious problems. And I know if they tried to launch all of their ICBMs or nuclear weapons, there would be a significant failure rate. Very high. Not 100% failure. Some of them would still succeed. We have to take the threat serious. But Russia's got problems. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Poland seizes tons of illegal Boeing jet tires bound for Russia in a major EU sanctions breach. Russia is desperate for more tires for their Boeing fleets, and they were trying to smuggle them in, pretending they were, like tractor tires or something, but Poland caught them. They're going to confiscate the tires. Denmark announces nearly 600 million in military aid for Ukraine. Thank you so much to the people of Denmark. All right, here's an update on Project Constantine. I mentioned this fundraiser that had been stalled out. The volunteers with Project Constantine reached out to me. I mentioned it here on the channel. And in the last 4 days, you guys have donated over 100,000 euros to their charity. They're very ecstatic. I want to give a quick shout out to people who have recently donated. I can see your contributions on the donor wall. Thank you so much to Bruno, Francis, Al, Stephen, Coco Cook, Susan Newman, Dale, Kevin, Elaine, Philippe, Berger, and the people at Project Constantine. This is a NGO. They also want to thank you for your contributions. This is Yana, wanting to thank everyone with the channel.
Hey Jake, it's Yana from Project Constantine. I just want to say thank you so much for the shout out you gave our raffle. Your community has been like mind-blowingly amazing. Since you've made that announcement, people have donated over 100,000 euros to our to all our fundraisers together, and it's amazing because it means we are able to help the guys. And one of the most difficult parts of our job as an NGO is having to tell defenders, like, sorry, we cannot help you, we do not have the money for this. So this is such a big thing for us because it means that we can help more people. So I just want to say thank you to you and to your community for helping, and don't know where we would be without people from around the world who care about Ukraine and who do their part to help. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.
All the donations go towards benefiting Pete's military units. They're going to buy vehicles, medical equipment, drones, and essential gear. If you still want to donate, once again, I'll put the link down below if you want to kick in $5 or $10. Thank you so much to everyone. This really does mean a lot to the people of Ukraine, knowing that people around the world are still engaged, still supporting. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.